in a corporate setup, it would be your equity capital. And to your equity capital, as you keep making profits, you either pay dividends or you transfer it to reserves. So equity capital plus reserves is the net worth of an organization. So an organization becomes fundamentally strong when the net worth keeps increasing year after year. Then so another important concept is your debt equity ratio. The more of debt you have in your capital structure, then dividend is not a tax deductible expenditure. Interest is a tax deductible expenditure. So you get a tax benefit because you have interest in your cost structure. Plus, interest is a contractual payment. You have to pay the same amount irrespective of your level of profits. So your earnings per share increases when more than in proportion when your earnings increase, because interest, that fixed expenditure, remains at the same level. So that is called financial leverage. And the fixed expense element in your cost structure, when you have variable costs and fixed costs, when you have more of fixed cost in your cost structure and less of variable expenses, then your per unit cost decreases, because as your production level increases, your variable expenses increase, but your fixed expense remains at the same level. That is your operating leverage. Then we did a cash cycle. That is your debtor cycle plus your inventory cycle minus your creditors cycle. So we did how to calculate the turnovers, debtors turnover, creditors turnover, stock turnover. Is numerator you will have either cost of goods sold or sales, and denominator would be either debtors or creditors or stock. So obviously you want a less cash cycle, because you want to give your customers less credit. You want your stock to be quickly converted into cash. And the smaller the cash cycle, the better for your business. A small cycle which should rotate very fast. A long cycle will take long to complete. So then your business is very robust. So remember, when the debtors turnover ratio should be high, when it should be low, when creditors turnover ratio should be high, when it should be low. It is just pure simple arithmetic that when denominator is bigger, quotient would be smaller. So we want lesser debtors because we want more of sales to be cash sales, or give less credit period to our debtors, so that we use the cash to be plowed back into the business to buy stocks and do business. We want stocks to be less, so the denominator to be less, so the ratio would be higher, so that we don't have too much of inventory in our stocks and run the risk of obsolescence or wastage or whatever, or have money, most importantly, blocked in those stocks. We did DuPont analysis, which is a very important analysis. It is your net profit upon sales, which tells you to what extent your organization has done well in the sales area, either by increasing the number of units sold or by increasing the selling price, or both, or how efficient they have been managing costs, which costs have they managed more efficiently. Then you have the asset turnover ratio, which is your assets multiplied, which is your turnover, sales multiplied by your assets, which tells you how much of the assets that you have used has resulted in the sales. So how efficient you are using the assets. Product of these two ratios will give you your ROA. Then you have your leverage. How much of your assets is financed by equity? Reserves belongs to equity shareholders. That gives you all the product of all these three ratios is the DuPont analysis that will give you your ROE. Then we did net present value, that is understanding the future cash flows. What is the present value of the future cash flows? You use the DCF factor, which is made up of three items: your real cost, your inflation plus your risk premium, or it is the cost of capital. So you can use your Excel tools for that, the PV tool in financial or the NPV tool in financial, and or you can do it manually in the Excel sheets by putting the DCF factor and you putting the dollar sign to stretch the to get the DCF factors. And of course, NPV analysis or IRR analysis, payback period, these are all methods But ultimately, to come to a decision, you have to use other factors also. You have to be on the scene. What are the things, other factors, like what skill sets of the laborers, their willingness to accept a new machine, the market for the new products, whether the spare parts are available, and all that. Uh, then we will do now the primary markets and the secondary markets, which is more about secondary markets is the stock markets where you get an exit option. So if you have invested in some shares through an IPO and you feel the valuation is good and you want to sell it, you can do that because you are in the because there is a secondary market to it. See, share capital, when you apply to a company, it is more or less permanent capital, and you get back the share capital. The money is paid back to you only when the company is liquidated or there is a buyback. Can somebody tell this delegate that his video is on and he should stop yawning so loudly? I know, for me, I don't know. I love the subject finance. I can go on, and there is beauty in the subject if you are passionate and you take an interest in it. Actually, if you understand the subject through the economic times or through the newspapers, it makes more sense because then it is relevant to what is happening in the real world. Then in M&A activities, you have to understand that 70% of the M&A is backfire because there is no synergy. After a certain time, uh, the target company people are just waiting to get their revenge sort of with they think that acquisition was like a sort of a cheat on them, that the acquirer tried to take benefit of some weakness in theirs. So if such is the scenario, then very often it fails. Very often today you have hostile takeovers. There are waves of M&A, just as you have Stone Age, Ice Age, or in your life you have childhood, adolescence, middle age, old age. In M&A, they say you have waves. First wave was more about monopolies. The second wave was more about the monopolies were more about horizontal integration, M&A activities. Then it came vertical, so that because then there were laws not allowing monopolies to allow to happen. Then you had vertical integration. Then you had conglomerate, organizations of doing different activities coming together, not related at all. And then you had a very bad phase of hostile takeovers. And now most of the takeovers are for logistic reasons, for funding reasons. And actually, if you do the Reliance case study, it is amazing. It is so much of backward integration through M&A. If you see the history, it started with selling yarn. Then because he did not want to buy yarn from outside, he said, we will manufacture yarn. Now to manufacture a yarn, he needed polyester. He said, I don't want to buy polyester from outside, so I will manufacture polyester. For polyester, he needed the raw material of oil and all, petroleum. So he said, I will not buy petroleum, I will manufacture petroleum. So this was classic case of backward integration. Then when he felt that the oil sector was losing its charm, because there was many of substitutes coming for fuels, and also the volatility in the markets was so much, and the time had come to diversify. So he went into retail, into music, into technology, into this mobile sector and everything. And then there was no time because there were so many players in the field. So they used M&A activity very, very aggressively. So actually, if you do make a study, you try to make a study of the Reliance story, there is a lot to learn from it. And now, many people say it all depends upon succession planning, because there is a time to how much will Mukesh Ambani be active. He has to pass over the reins. So would the succession planning be successful? Would they be able to deliver the same way? So it's a very interesting story you can go through. So M&A activity is a challenge because very often they backfire, they don't. So there has to be synergy, meaning whatever is the ROI which the investors were getting before the M&A activity, they should get more after the M&A activity. Then we saw how there are certain very valuable things like patents, brands, which are self-generated, which are not shown in the balance sheet. But there is a method to value it if for whatever reason you want to sell it, or for some reason you want to value it. Then in exports and imports, you saw today what is the scene, that rupee is depreciating. And in fact, exporters are rejoicing because of that. In fact, China has two types of currencies, one valuation for export import and one for their domestic purchases. They control the uh, foreign currency, or the currency which is paired with other currencies, in a very big way. Then we did corporate governance. It is following rules set up by the company inside the organization, standard operating processes, and the compliance is required from your dealers, from your customers, from the government, the laws and all that. Today, foreign companies who want to invest in India, the FPI are insisting on ESG compliant accounts, meaning you are conscious of seeing that you don't damage the environment. Ecology damage is not done. Climate change issues you bear in mind. Don't contaminate waters. If you contaminate the air, you cannot do business without some ecology damage. You have to um, refurbish it, plant more trees, clean the water and all that. So, and then social impact, see that you do your CSR, you improve the locality in which you are doing business, you buy local. When you grow, others also should grow with you. And governance, of course, you cannot do money laundering, you cannot do cheating, you cannot be hoarding and all that. Then agency issue we didn't touch upon, which is a very important concept. It is, see, it's a very fantastic setup, the company, the corporate setup. It is you and me giving them money, somebody else managing the money and spending the money. So each one is looking at it at a different perspective. The managing directors, the CEOs, the CFOs just want big package, huge bonuses, swanky cars, high-rise building apartments, of education for their children in foreign universities and all that. What are they bothered about the organization? The other people want promotions, they want appreciation, they want pay rise and all that. So each one's perception of working in the organization is different. While investors are just focused on getting an ROI, that when they exit in the secondary markets, there should be capital appreciation of their share value, or they should be getting good dividends. So how do you meet the perceptions of the shareholders with the people who are managing the organization? So that gap is called the agency issue. So agency issue is there because shareholders are so diversified, they can't take part in the day-to-day management, neither do they have the competence. So to keep this agency issue minimal, there are certain processes, there are certain ways, strategies in which you can do. Like if the CEO's bonus is linked to the bottom line, he will try to fudge the bottom line. He or she will try to drive the employees to meet unbelievable targets. So what do? You link the bonus to, say, attrition rate. So what does the CEO do? He tries to keep the employees happy. Employees are happy, automatically productivity is good, automatically the goal of the organization is met. Salesmen, if they are getting commission, they will sell a product and say any features which the product doesn't have also. So, but if you link the commission and keep increasing the commission to repeated sales in that organization, in that locality, then the salesman automatically does ethical selling. So automatically the organization's goal of, say, branding or sustainability is met, and the salesman's goal is also met. So somehow you have to bridge this gap between the goals and make them more congruent. Uh, so that is all about agency issue. And agency issue is there. It is when the goal of the organization is different from the people, and the goal of the owners is different from the goals of the people managing the organization. So that's more or less what I've tried to cover. And now I will just share a PPT.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, somebody wanted to ask something.
Hello.
Yes, Tushar, tell me.
My doubt is we use economic concept of demand and supply in daily trading or in daily stock market trading. But how can we use economic terms and point in long-term investments?
1 minute. 1 minute. Let me come to you. You can see the slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, what is your question? Come again.
And my question is, we use economic concept of demand and supply in stock market
There is
and
too
trading.
much noise in the background. I can't hear. Can Shruti repeat the question? Or Tushar, can you say again?
Tushar, or else please type it in the chat box.
Tushar, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm typing my question in chat box.
Yes, just repeat your question.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, my question is, we use demand and supply concept from economics in daily on daily basis in stock market trading. But how can we use economics in long-term investment in stock market or in any mutual funds?
Okay. So, what your question, if I understand right, is that what are the parameters you do for trading and what are the parameters you do for long-term investment? Okay. So let me tell you, the concepts are the same, but you have to see, like, the same thing you stretch to what I had said about a certain cost. A certain cost may be a sunk cost, it may be a fixed cost. It is the how you look at it and for what purpose. Now, are you valuing for trading purpose? Are you valuing for speculation purpose? Are you valuing for gambling purpose, or are you valuing for investment purpose? So all the four activities are different. So the tools may be the same, but the way you handle the tools would be different, because investment is long term. Once you put in money, you're not going to juggle unless there is some major macroeconomic change, which is irreversible. What is speculation? Speculation is entering the market with some knowledge. It is which are those movies? So there are some I forget the name. Operations, some movie it is, where they do gambling in Las Vegas and earn a lot of money. So that is, how do they earn that money? Because they use probability theory. So when you're doing when you're entering the stock markets with some calculation, with some theory, that is speculation. Trading is buying and selling without taking delivery. Gambling is just following gut feeling. In the train you're traveling, somebody says आज ये share का price ऊपर जाएगा, or somebody is speaking on the TV कि this is a good stock to buy, so you buy out of gut feeling. That is gambling. So when you are entering a gambling den without any calculations in your mind, you know you'll either lose all the money or you'll get back part of the money or more of it. So it depends what you are doing. Now, if I understand, you're doing trading. Trading, mostly you people use technical analysis, and for and that also the small movements in the technical analysis, and they see more of the news feeds which are going to impact the market. And fundamental analysis is different. In fundamentals, what it is, you have the market value and you have the fundamental value, and you assume the markets want to be efficient, that the fundamental value will get pulled towards the market value. So if fundamental value is low, then the share price is going to increase. It's time to buy. And if the fundamental value is high, and the market value is low, then the market value will go towards the fundamental value. So means if fundamental value is high and market value is low, market value is going to go up. So it's the time to buy. If fundamental value is low and market value is high, so it is going to come towards the fundamental value. It is going to fall. So this is the way the decisions are taken, or buy, sell, or this. But you don't take buy, sell, or hold when you're doing investment. For investment, it's a different ball game. You are not looking at graphs of demand supply. You're not looking at technical analysis, nothing. What you're looking at is, first, you need to know why are you investing. Step one is you must have your policy statement in place. If I can quickly summarize this, what you are trying to ask is, when you are doing investments, step one is you must have your preliminaries in place. By preliminaries in place means you must look after your insurance needs, your liquidity needs. So suppose you all may not need life insurance. Some may need life insurance. Some may need some other type of insurance. So whatever insurance you need, you do it. Insurance penetration is very low in India, and it is one of the best hedge instruments you can think of. Once you have looked after, seen to your premium outflows, you need some liquidity. God forbid you are laid off or something. You need 6 months living expense with you in a liquid form. Only after your preliminaries and liquidity needs are met, you start your portfolio construction. Before that, you need a policy statement. A policy statement should give your goals, your short-term goals, your long-term goals. In short-term goals, which are high priority, which are low priority. In long-term goals, which are high priority, which are low priority. You need to understand your risk profile. How much risk can you take? High, medium, low. That keeps changing with age. Only after you have your policy statement in place, then you start your investments. Then you need a strategy. Do you want to do passive? Do you want to do active? Passive is just investing in the index fund. So if stock market does good, you're doing good. If not doing good, you're not doing good. Go as per the markets. Or you want to beat the markets, do little more of technical fundamental analysis and beat the markets. Then there is a cycle. You have to take high risk when you're young. So high risk, high return. So your portfolio value goes up very steeply when you are young. As you become more and more towards middle age, you stop taking risks, and then you juggle your portfolio, put it in little risk-free investments like say bonds or longs also become low. Your valuation becomes low. So maybe your portfolio value will come down a little. And then finally, when you're 75 plus, 80 plus, you're not taking the money with you. You spend it, enjoy it, or give it away to your people, your near and dear ones. Like my friend, I have a very close friend. We used to go out to have coffee very often, the pre-pandemic times. So she used to call the waiter and first tip him. I said, "What's this?" So the waiter knows, that I'm going to tip, so he'll give us good service. Similarly, your money is going to go to your kith and kin. You might as well give it to them when you're alive, when you're 75, 80 plus, so that few years you have, they treat you well. Of course, you all have seen movies like King Lear or other movies. So you have to be careful that you keep a lot for yourself also, so that your standard of living is not hampered. So and each one is unique. Our fingerprints are different. Our DNA is different. So your goals and my goals, or your neighbor's goal or your colleagues' goals are totally different. So each one's goals are different, and you have to invest for a reason. You can't be investing for investment's sake. So and that should all come in your policy statement. So see, there are people who in the first week of third week of March just sold off their shares thinking the stock markets will crash. So that was a knee-jerk reaction. But if their policy statement had said what should be their reaction during some macroeconomic disruption or upheaval in the markets, what should they do? So policy statement should contain the steps to be taken. It's a very thought of statement. You can do it by Googling, by going through Rayleigh and Brown textbook is a very good book, Rayleigh and Brown. You can go through that book, or you can Google, or a wealth manager sit with you if you're an HNI and help you to draft your policy statement. It also depends on your personality. There's nothing wrong in being an optimist or a pessimist or a cynic. It is as per your personality, you structure your portfolio, because on that depends your goals also. And And very often we are a product of what others think about us. We think our goals should be such. So we are conditioned by what others think about us, right from childhood, what our teachers thought about us, what our parents thought about us, what our friends is unique, and each person's portfolio is absolutely unique. Still to a very strong bonded group. And when we compare our portfolios, it is more or less of the same value, but the profile, but the structure is totally different, because your portfolio is a product of your decisions, and your decisions is a product of your personality. So you understand yourself. So you need to have all this in place before you start just deep diving in the and start investing and making mistakes or burning your fingers. Safest way is to do your SIP, because then you trust mutual fund managers who have the time, who have the resources, who have the tools to do the market analysis. And if you go too much into market analysis, do it definitely if you are in that sector and somebody is paying you to do it. But if you are not in that sector and nobody is paying you to do it, very often you are using quality time which you should use for your career development into this, forever thinking about this. अरे यार मैंने HUL ये price में लिया, अभी HUL ये price में है, अभी I should sell, and this quality time is lost. Is it worth it? Ultimately, after 10 years, somebody who has put lot of thought and somebody who has not put thought, maybe the portfolio value is the same. What matters is the timing. You have to start young, because the power of compounding is impossible to imagine. So start young. As soon as you have a surplus, open your demat account. You can invest, even buy 1 share, 2 shares. Stick to blue chip companies which you think may not go wrong. Try to take risk and go into some they say hidden gems, or they call them what, wildcats or something. Like once upon a time, in our times, Infosys was a wildcat. Nobody knew that it would be of so much value. We have bought HDFC in our times at 10 rupees, Infosys at below par, ACC at 75 rupees, and at that time we thought it was big amount we are paying. The rights of ACC was 75, and many people allowed the rights to expire, did not use those rights because they thought it was too highly valued. There was no market also for those share forms. So it is your reading of the organization, what is the future of the organization, and how long do you want to stay in that asset. So entering the market at the right time is important, but more important is which are the sectors you want to invest in. So whether you want to invest in Maruti or Mahindra, that is important, but more important is whether you want to invest in the auto sector. And if you want to invest, what is the weightage you give? That is the most important. So the weights to the assets, that is the trick of all mutual fund managers. You go through mutual fund managers' balance sheet. Actually, you can do passive investment by just following a mutual fund, any good mutual fund which has a good CAGR. Follow their balance sheet. How are they investing? What is their structure? What is the weights they are giving to the auto sector, to the chemical sector? In the auto sector, which companies they are doing? So they will give the weights in the notes to accounts. So that weight which you give, asset allocation which you do, is important. Asset allocation is which, how much equity, how much FD, how much mutual funds, how much gold, how much land, real estate, and all that. But most important is the weights you give to the asset classes. Because see, suppose you have 40% in equity and 60% in mutual fund, you may get a return of say 12%. But if you reverse it, 60% equity, 40% mutual funds, you may get a return of 14%. So now return is capital, is market given. High risk, high return, medium risk, medium return, low risk, low return. So you have to decide what is your the return that you want. That will be in sync with your risk taking ability. Once you have decided, you know what is your risk taking ability, once you know the return that you want, then you structure your portfolio in such a way that you should get the return you want at the minimal risk. That is the aim. When the risk is minimum, there is greater chance that your portfolio, which matures after say 10 years, or you will sell off after 15 years, that is when you want to meet your goal, there is greater chance that that investment gives you that returns which you want. So I don't know, I've tried to cover an entire thing in a few minutes, if that has made sense to you, Tushar.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now I will do the PPT. Can you see the PPT?
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, these are the topics given to me, and I think they're very well covering what you would need in the corporate world. But again, let me tell you again and again, in the corporate world, what works is confidence, what works is communication skills, and what works is hard work. Uh, you see people who are very, very successful, and you see, wow, 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 they're so intelligent. Let me tell you, it is 1% intelligence, 1% genius, it is 99% perspiration. I have seen people working on projects from morning 8 to night 8 without a bio break also. You need that kind of commitment, a passion, a dedication, and that can come only if you like what you're doing. You have to develop a passion. Passion is something which nobody can teach. No, nobody can, they say the most important things in life cannot be taught. You have to develop it. uh, Even if you don't like something, you have to find a way to like it, and over a period it becomes a habit and you start liking it. So unless you have passion, unless you have dedication, it doesn't work. And you need dialogue. You need to keep talking to your colleagues, to your seniors. That brings clarity. So very often you think that they want something, but they may be wanting something else. So don't be shy to talk, to interact. Like, I appreciate people here, that Tushar and all those who have been asking questions. At least they're making an effort to have a dialogue. It's only when you have a dialogue in life it works. It's only when you speak it works. Be an extrovert. That doesn't mean, you just chatter, empty chatter, which is draining on people's time. I mean, in the industry, people don't have time to mentor you. They will just give you a project and expect you to take the lead. So you have to be proactive to that extent also. So let's see what are intermediaries, financial intermediaries basically, and financial non-intermediaries. So financial intermediaries, they mobilize your savings, means they take money from one party and give money to the other party. So they are, and what they earn is the spread. When they take money from you, they will give you interest. When they give money to somebody else, they will charge interest. That difference is their income, correct? So your savings would be your investment in the banks, but for the bank, it would be a liability because they have to return it to you. The loans that you take from the bank would be your liability, but for the bank, it is an asset. They've given you the loan and you will pay it back to them. So that is how financial intermediaries work. And how do financial non-intermediaries work is that, yes, they also are into this sector of giving loans, but they are not a bridge between the savers and the borrowers. They don't bring them together. They give loans from resources which may not be the savings of somebody else. So it's an important function. Savings need to be invested. If it is not, then and just hold it, kept under the carpet or kept in bottles and all, it cannot be put to productive use, and ultimately it leads to economic stagnation. Can somebody tell me what is the problem in India? Where do savings go which is not productive?
Purchase of gold.
Absolutely right. Perfect. See, and that is the mindset in India, that gold is something which you can immediately liquidate, which you can give as a collateral and get loans. It is very true. But what happens in the capital markets or through financial intermediaries, our money is lent to somebody else for business. And that is how the economy progresses. But when you put your savings in gold, it stops there. It doesn't get, it is not lent to anybody else to do business. And that is why there is economic stagnation. Now the government is trying a lot. You have e-gold, you have sovereign gold bonds and all, so that the people's faith in gold is also maintained. Their urge to invest in gold is also maintained, but it may not lead to economic stagnation. But it will require tremendous mindset, change of mindset, change of societal attitude, which is very, very difficult. I mean, to some extent, it has been successful in cigarette smoking. Cigarette smoking was a big thing in the 70s and even 80s, but gradually it has stopped, and today's youth, in fact, have zero cigarette smoking. So it has this change, this awareness of cigarette smoking, of tobacco. Of course, for gutka it has not worked, but somehow for cigarette smoking it has worked. So how government is trying, but this entire societal mindset of putting in gold is not working. Of course, there is a slight change I can see. Means I can see some of the young people I am mentoring. They don't care about jewelry. They would like to invest in gadgets. Uh, so in their marriages and all, if their mothers give them this jewelry, that jewelry, they say, "Oh, give it and keep it in your locker only. I'm not interested." They would rather have an Apple device or something else. So maybe this mindset, slowly due to the change in the way we work, is changing. So basically, it's a great economic function that some people have excess money, which is all pulled together, given to people who want money, which put it in the production activities in for business, and then the economic cycle works. So you all know about the four factors of production: land, labor, capital, enterprise. So capital is very, very important, and India is starved of capital. So we need money to pump into the economy so that the factors of production start churning. Okay. Now, for retail investors, you and me, how do financial intermediaries help? You suppose we put in mutual funds. So they are huge. They have resources at their disposal. They can do data analysis faster and help us in our investments. Other process, if we had done it directly, maybe we would have to go through some process which could be little more cumbersome. That there is a secondary market because of the financial intermediaries, and we can sell whenever we want. So the liquidity is there to our investments. The secondary market is the stock markets. The price risk is lesser. Uh, then there is, you have asset liability mismatch in our portfolio. We may be having assets, and then maybe we have to liquidate them because if some liability arises. So but this asset liability management is done better by financial intermediaries. So you can have insurance policy for your emergency needs, and you can have mutual funds for your investment needs and all that. And today, because of demat accounts and e-investments and all, your denominations also can be small. You can start a demat account with and buy shares of just 500 rupees, buy just one share, 5 shares of a organization. So these are a lot of benefits to the this thing. And um, the most important benefit which financial intermediaries have got is a product of SIP. So you can every month keep investing a little bit. In fact, I know people who first invest and then spend, rather than investing their surplus, the surplus remaining after their spending. Then the impact of monetary policy. One of the main function of an RBI is what? Pump money into the economy and suck out money into the economy. So these policies, expansionary, contractionary policies, are they forever doing, depending upon the scenario in the markets. So some extent of inflation is needed in the economy, but if it becomes too much, means what? There is too much money chasing too few goods, so they suck out the money. And they do it by selling bonds, buying bonds, increasing rates, repo rates, and reverse repo rates and all that, or decreasing it. And also they have various tools, techniques by which they try to impact the markets. And this impact is better felt when it is done through through the regulated financial intermediaries. Then you have sectors like some sectors which normally people would not like to give loans uh, because maybe they are not ready to pay very high interest or something, though they may be safe. But then this allocation of credit becomes mandatory, and these sectors also gain, and which are needed for the economy. Wealth transfers is much easier, like your future generation, you can have on your death, people get the amount you have taken of life insurance and all. Then payment services, we all are using our RGTS, NEFT, Paytm, and UPI and all that. It really helps in the ease of doing business, of obtaining funds and making payments and all that. So this is a upcoming thing now, and today the trend is now that these services are done by organizations other than banks, which was never done, never thought of also 10 years ago. So basically, who are financial intermediaries? They are banks, all banks, whether nationalized, private, foreign, whatever. So, you have something like scheduled banks in the, people come across this term. So actually, scheduled banks are those banks which are mentioned in the schedule of the RBI no, circulars. So in that circular, it's not only nationalized banks, all banks working in India. So ICICI, HSBC also could be a scheduled bank. So all the banks working in India are financial intermediaries. NBFCs, most of the NBFCs are not allowed to accept deposits, but they give loans, and they give loans to sectors where banks don't give generally. But now there are bigger NBFCs which are allowed to also take deposits. And of course, you all know about which scam was that which gave a very bad name to NBFCs. Yes, anybody?
DHFL,
Very good. One of that, yes, recent. And before that, a bigger one.
Punjab National Bank.
Yes, that is that Nirav Modi, right? But Punjab National Bank is a bank, not a NBFC.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
No, not at all. But that is a very good answer. Yes, that was a big scam. You heard of the ILFS scam?
Yes, ma'am.
So that really shook the NBFC world, and it took back our economy a lot. That scam. Then you have microfinance institutions. They offer financial services more to the poor, to the underprivileged, and they are doing very well, some of them. But it is a myth to say that they give low interest. Their interest rates are very high. But again, they are catering to a sector which normally a bank or NBFC. No, see, NBFC caters to a sector which banks don't. Microfinance would cater to a sector which NBFC does not. Then you have self-help groups. Group of people come together and then they pool in their money, and because of that, the corpus, the strength, they also get financing from the banks. So there are a lot of self-help groups, and the government is also supporting them. Of course, insurance companies, you have general insurance companies, life insurance, health insurance, agriculture, reinsurance, and all. So you have many insurance companies. You have pension funds. You have, like, you give an annuity today, big amount, and you get over a period. Or you keep making small payments for a long period, and then you get a lump sum after a period. So you have different kinds of pension plans and pension funds. Then, of course, you have the NSDLs, CDSL depositories where you open your DMAT account. They make it easier for you to enter the primary market and the secondary market. Credit rating agencies which help you to take your decisions. And of course, Lehman Brothers had AAA rating before they had the downfall. So you have to take the ratings also with a pinch of salt. Mutual funds, I would advise heavily on mutual funds if you don't want to be in the business of. And very often when you are working for a broking firm, when you're working for a financial intermediary, you're not allowed to invest in the capital markets directly, because you would be having access to some information which they would consider as insider trading then. So mutual fund route is a safe route. Of course, you have different plethora of mutual funds which suits to you. So when you're younger, you should go for equity-based mutual funds, growth mutual funds, and go for direct investments and not through your brokers or anything. So those who do not have a tripartite DMAT account, I would advise you, just open it today or tomorrow. Just go to and call up, you can do it online, call up any wealth advisory service of HDFC, ICICI, or anybody you feel like, stock holding or something. Open a DMAT account, because unless you jump into the water, you will not learn to swim. You must build up your portfolio on your own. Keep buying shares in the primary market, keep buying shares through IPOs, keep buying mutual funds through SIPs. Amounts may be small, but you can easily spare 100, 200 per month. And as I told you, the younger you start, it is the better. Now coming to the big unorganized sector in India, the India's GDP is very, very misleading. You've all heard of Aage Dukan, Piche Makan. So the real Bombay, if you have seen, is in Paiduni, Bhuleshwar, Sikanagar. You have, crores of rupees circulating over there. How much will a panwala be making over there? Far more than you and me will make in the corporate world. It is huge money over there, but it's all in the unorganized sectors. These people, they live in one room, in a chawl style, but they can afford to take a chartered flight to Nathadwara once a year to go to their Jain pilgrimage and spend and donate crores to their Jain mandirs. So there is lot of money in India, but it is in the unorganized sector. And now whether it is right to have so much of parallel economy or whether it is wrong, you cannot be judgmental about this, because there are some people who are in the unorganized sector who are extremely honest. Like you have these Angadia courier services who carry diamonds from one country to another country, or from one city to another city, or one locality to another locality. They are unorganized. They are not the official courier services of the postal services, government run, but never has there been a theft over there. So you have to understand the reason why the unorganized sector is and how to make it an organized sector, and what are the gaps in the organized sector which is not allowing them to be here. Then you have indigenous bankers. They still exist. They are called the Shroffs, the Marwadis, the Multanis, the Kharitis, Baniyas, Mahajans, or whatever it is. Banks were nationalized in 1969, but still we have these indigenous bankers who are very popular, and sometimes they play a more important role in the life of people than banks. People are intimidated to go to banks. And these indigenous bankers, they are doing well, and some of them slowly now are entering into the cooperative sector and then into the banking sector. Money lenders and indigenous bankers are slightly different. Indigenous bankers, it is their business. They use the same banking philosophy. They will accept deposits and they will give loans. Money lenders, they normally just give loans, and they still continue to play a big role in the life of people. They take loans for agricultural purposes, to fund marriages, for their festivals. Now, if you go to a bank and say that I want to celebrate Holi and I don't have money, give me 5,000 rupees, the banker will say, go home, don't celebrate Holi. But a money lender understands the urge of a Indian person who's steeped in tradition. The urge to celebrate Holi is important. He recognizes that, and a compassionate money lender would be good, but there are some money lenders who take advantage too. The chit funds is now almost banned, and there are many people who have got cheated by chit funds, and it started as a very popular scheme, and more in the south. You had the Sudarshan chit fund and all, where a group of people put in money together, and then you have these kitty parties, ladies also who have that, and then the kitty opens and one person gets it before time. So that person is getting money free of interest, something that way it is. And then, of course, the Sahara scam happened, which was more like chit fund. So as I told you, if the unorganized sector does not allow the impact of monetary policies to happen, then there is lack of regulation, there are no audits, or malpractices can take place. But there are many initiatives taken by the government, like this Jan Dhan Yojana, where people can open zero balance account. Now I think they need certain balance in the account, where they can open only on the basis of Aadhaar card and no other proof of residence is required, and all electric bill and all that they don't have to submit. So government is taking steps to bring people into the organized sector, so that on monetary policies is felt. Then actually, one thing India is lacking is in capital. We don't have capital. Our businesses don't have capital to start their business or to keep their business going. So government had tried with many banks specifically developed for that. then at the state level, at the central level. So this then financial intermediaries can also be classified into banking and non-banking. So banking we saw, non-banking could be insurance companies, mutual funds, investment companies, pension funds. Another classification would be fee-based and asset-based. Fee-based is financial intermediaries earning revenues through, say, doing work of IPO, capital restructuring, consultancy, syndicated credit, means bringing 2-3 banks together to get credit, portfolio management services and all that. That is fee-based. And you have asset-based intermediaries. That is like leasing. I had told you, they provide the required asset you want, or they give you money to, so that you can take the required asset on lease. I think that's it from me.
Ma'am, I have one question.
So now I think we will open up just for discussion. Enough of talking from my side. I want you all to talk now.
Yes, ma'am. Why privatization is there in public sector banks? So many public sector banks.
Come again, what?
Why privatization is there of so many public sector banks? Means what are the reasons?
Privatization.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So what happens in privatization? Government shares are sold to the general public, correct? Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So what happens? Government gets money. Government wants money, no? They are pumping in so much money into the economy today. And why are they pumping in so much money into the economy? It is the lessons that all the governments have learned from the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, what did the government felt, advised by the economists then, is starve the economy. Don't give it money. It will stabilize. And then it became worse and worse, the situation. So today, before anything happens, all countries, US, Japan, all Germany, all are pumping money into the economy. India is no less. Arey chalo, economy mein paisa dalo. Lot of money into the economy is being pumped. So many crores is allocated for this scheme, so many crores allocated for that scheme. So where will they get the money? They have to privatize.
But ma'am, it will increase the inflation also then, because of that.
Huh?
It will increase inflation also, no?
It is?
It will increase the
Ma'am, it
inflation
will
also.
inflation, right?
It will what?
Increase the inflation rate
It
also.
will increase inflation.
Inflation, yes, yes. But little bit inflation is needed. And also, one has to understand that government should do less and less of, more and more of governance and less of business.
Ma'am, I had a question.
Huh.
Ma'am, is there any chance in future that cryptocurrency may be legalized in India?
Actually, the work of a good finance person is a work of an astrologer. If you saw, finance is all about projections, about estimates and all. So those who invested in cryptocurrency 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they have minted money. It's difficult to say now. It's each one's call to take. Again, the call you're taking is how you're looking at it. Are you looking at it from investment point of view, or are you looking at it to make a quick buck, or are you looking at it to use it in your business as a platform? There is a trend now. They're trying to, de-link cryptocurrency from bitcoins. So if you can develop your own cryptocurrency, I think Google tried to do it. And if you go to see, to some extent, you have Google points, you have Paytm points. They are to some extent a kind of currency that they have developed.
Ma'am, but the syntax in the system is that though cryptocurrency is illegal, if you are watching the IPL, in the IPL, the ad comes of CoinSwitch Kuber. So you can download that app from Play Store, and there it is there is a written and tagline below that this is subject to market test and it is still not legal in India. So trade at your own risk. Then how is this possible? Like, if they are saying it is illegal, then why is it legal to show an ad of people trading in crypto?
See, there is legal, illegal. It's again, if you complain, perhaps, if somebody complains, perhaps, then maybe action will be taken. Till now, nobody may have complained. And maybe illegal not from their viewpoint, illegal from your viewpoint. Advertising about it, there may be no ban on that, about a game. Advertising a game, there may not be a ban on it. There may be a ban on you participating in the game. So, I mean, these people are not fools. They will have looked into all the four corners of the law and then only come in. But there is a change in mindset if you go to see of the governments. In fact, there was some Supreme Court decision that came down heavily on the RBI, which said you cannot monopolize this way of doing business today. You have to go with times, and things are changing today. People are, I mean, see today, like newspapers, in our times, newspapers, suppose when they started, how did they earn money? They earned money from what you paid for the newspaper. Gradually, they started earning money not from what you paid for them, that was pittance. They got big money from the advertisements. So similarly, today, the way of doing business only has changed. No? You are not looking at, means whatever we say, net worth and all, people are now looking more at funding. Ye cred ko itna funding mila, isko itna funding mila. So the more of funding you go, the more its value in the eyes of the markets. Things are changing, and the pace of change is so much. But definitely cryptocurrency has a future. In some form or the other, it will have a future. Even I would say to some extent, cricket betting also. No? Something which the society wants. After all, what is law? Law is societal behavior. So before the criminal law also was passed, murder was wrong. Before you had the criminal code in the world, murder was wrong. So why did the criminal code come saying murder is wrong? It was rationalizing, it was codifying societal behavior. So if society wants cricket betting, then you legalize it. It is legal in UK and other countries. So the time may have come to legalize in India. Similarly, cryptocurrency, if the society wants it, the law will have to change. The law is actually adoption of societal behavior. You cannot dictate to the society how to behave. And societal behavior is an evolvement. It happens over a period.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, apart from financial modeling, what extra certifications and skills are required for finance professionals?
See, to be very honest, this certification programs and all looks very good on your CV. Maybe the first job you will get because of your certification programs, because your CV is very heavy. But to rise up in any job, the business community is least bothered whether you are a CFA, whether you have done your certification programs, whether you're from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Wharton, IIMs or wherever. What they want is for you to perform. And for you to perform, you have to deep dive into experiences. You have to read a lot and you have to work hard. Whatever job you get, you have to prove yourself over there. Having said that, financial modeling is a good course. CFA is an excellent course. Then now you have another technique, parallel to CFA, which is more on market analysis, fundamental analysis. You have technical analysis also, their sister concern, CMA body. Then those who find CFA very tough, they can do that ACCA also, which is also accepted by the big fours. Then that FRPS, financial risk management course is also very good. See, the BSc, NSc certifications are also good, but they're very, I mean, every Tom, Dick and Mary is doing it, but you can do it for your value addition. But more recognized by industry is CFA and these such certification programs. If you go through Coursera, you get some very good courses offered by foreign universities. So you can do those courses also. No? They give you courses offered by MIT, offered by Sloan and all.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta ma'am, for giving such a wonderful insights related with finance. Last question, I think we can, I'll just ask you from placement perspective. So as many of my students are interested to take finance as a specialization, and I'm sure you will be agree to it that there is always a mismatch between students' expectations and the company, student aspirations and the company expectations in terms of the profile also. So what advice would you like to give these young generations to start their career in finance as a specialization now?
See, I would say don't look at the profile. If you're getting Citi, if you're getting JP Morgan, if you're getting Credit Suisse, whatever is the profile, you take it. As it is at the starting, very often they tell you a profile and they make you do something else only. Because they have come with the objective, ये institute से तीन उठाना है. अभी क्या बोलने का? In the morning they think क्या profile बोलने का? And something they come up with. So don't be too serious about profile. Be serious about entering a branded organization, because for life you will be a ex-Citi. For life you will be a ex-JP Morgan. So go more for brand when you are going there. Profiles, water finds its own level. Once you enter an organization, then you prove your worth. They are not fools. Organizations do proper staffing. If you are good at analysis, they are not going to keep you in marketing. If you're good at marketing, they're not going to keep you in some other profile which is not value addition to the organization. So the aim is to get a job in these difficult times. It's very difficult to get a job. Even top institutes are facing issues, very difficult. So whatever job you get, just grab it. And once you enter, prove yourself. And there's no need to stick to it. Gone is the days a rolling stone gathers no moss theory. Young people, they jump jobs like anything. And everywhere they are gathering more and more experience and going. And even organizations are ready to take these people because they feel they come with a past experience. So grab a job, prove yourself like a sponge, absorb everything from that organization, learn the skill sets, and keep trying to be on the lookout for a better option, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, I have a quiz which I want to share with the people. They can quickly do it. It is, I think, 20 questions, half minute each, very simple quiz. I'll just share the link with you.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, tell me.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Ma'am, I wanted to go for accounting and taxation as my career. What is your view on that? Can I pursue that after my MBA program?
No, you cannot pursue accounting and taxation career. Yeah, you can, but you'll have tough competition from chartered accountants. So what you can do is you first, then you will have to do your CFA or something that way.
Okay.
So you can take a job in the big fours.
Yeah. And
And
after
then
that,
pursue your CFA also.
okay, ma'am. If I did my sorry, not the articleship, the 2-month internship under CA, that would be feasible for me or beneficial for me?
The kind of experience you will get in a CA firm is mind-boggling. You will not get it anywhere else, I would think. But how much it would be useful from a placement viewpoint, because the PPO, if you get, they are not big paymasters. No? So if you're getting a placement, if you're getting summer placement in the big fours, just take it.
Okay, ma'am. Not if in a big fours, then other.
So then if there you're getting networking, because there will be clients. Suppose you are working in a CA firm, but they have HUL as a client or they have Wipro as a client, then definitely you have a chance.
Okay,
that you network there. But the kind of experience you'll get in a CA firm, I've been in a CA firm, is amazing.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you. So I'm thinking of getting a 2 month of experience from a CA or any other chartered accountant, maybe basic taxation about GST and TDS.
So don't be too particular when at this age about your niche area, because you don't know yourself. No, so accept and do all the work. Then automatically you will understand for what do you have an aptitude.
Okay, so going to accounting and taxation is beneficial for me after the MBA. That's my question. Like I'm in dilemma right now. So what to take as my career path?
99.9% of the CFOs of the world are engineers. They are not from accounting and taxation background. They are doing accounting and taxation work. So nothing can stop you. But as I told you, 80% of your progress in life, in your career, is from experience.
Yes, ma'am.
So the kind of exposure you get and the kind how you prove yourself over there, how you network with your seniors, with your mentors. You know, you've heard of this Parsi story, all of you. I'm running short of time. It is when they came from Persia to India, and they landed in Valsad. And the king over there said that we don't have place in our territory. As it is, we have a huge population. Please go back. So the Parsi chief told him to get a bowl of milk and put a fistful of sugar in it. And he said, see, our community will blend in your environment. We will not be a load. We will sweeten it. We will strengthen it. So similarly, in any and if you see, they've really tried to do it. So if you see in any corporate world, when you take up a job, you have to strengthen the working of that organization, the culture of the organization. You have to contribute to that organization. You cannot at this age start thinking, what should be my niche area? What should I focus on? Am I learning the right skill sets and all? Just do whatever can be done. Just keep contributing. When you contribute, you learn. When you learn, you're doing things better. When you're doing things better, you are noticed. And so, and no, don't network with the intent of getting jobs or anything. Network with your seniors not for the intent of getting promotions or getting a pre-placement offer or whatever. Network with them to understand what are the operating practices, understand their way of thinking, their way of working, what are the good corporate practices, understand where you should go, and work with passion, work with dedication. Actually, whatever is your profile, whatever is your kind of job that you're doing, really doesn't matter. At this age, you do everything. And then you understand, because you really don't know yourself still. I know people who have highly qualified chartered accountants who have produced movies. I know people who have spent 3 years in Columbia University learning to do movie making, who have become investment bankers. So your qualification should not be, in fact, a hurdle or obstacle for your career development. Okay, just see if you can open this link and solve this quiz. Have I answered your question? I don't know.
Yes, ma'am. I got it. Thank you.
Is the link opening? Is the Google form opening?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so send it to me and I'll immediately send you the marks. Okay, too good. Some 4-5 people have already sent. I would say this is good. Yeah, real speed. Fantastic. That is passion. That is what I said. In life, what you need is passion. Okay, Kavita, should I then leave now?
Ma'am, I think Param.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Param will propose vote of thanks, ma'am, for a minute, and then we will have a group photo, and after that,
So
ma'am, you may.
at your own pace, you can solve the quiz. I will keep the form open for about 2 hours
Okay.
and then close
Yes.
it.
Yes, Param.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Param Sawant, on behalf of the Placement Officer Kavita ma'am and the entire class, would like to thank our speaker, Ms. Sangeeta Pandit, for enriching us with our knowledge. Today's session was full of knowledgeable and interesting things. It gave us deep insights into the topic of finance and also revealed how we can improve our skills in this field. Sangeeta ma'am started a session by explaining the impact of recording transactions and economic principles on business decisions, as well as highlighting the importance of developing an understanding of core concept of finance. Ma'am further explained the use of ratio analysis by describing liquidity, leverage, profitability, and efficiency ratios to interpret financial statements and explain the current financial condition of a firm. Through practical and real-life examples such as the case of Castro Company, ma'am explained the principles of good corporate governance such as the Blue Ocean strategy and the importance of succession planning in the future well-being of a company. She also summarized different models such as the DuPont analysis to understand possible returns from a company and the NPV analysis to evaluate the capital budgeting decisions when evaluating a firm. Finally, ma'am explained different types of financial intermediaries and the benefits they provide to the economy. Through attending this session, I'm sure she has definitely influenced in every attendee a great sense of newfound knowledge that will help them in the pursuit of finance specialization. Once again, I would like to thank Mrs. Sangeeta Pandit for taking out time from a busy schedule and sharing her knowledge with us. I would also like to thank our placement officer Kavita Mishra ma'am for organizing this session and inviting Mrs. Sangeeta to conduct it. And lastly, I would like to thank all the students present here for paying attention and learning from this session. I would like to end my speech here. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, Param. Thank you, Param. Sangeeta ma'am, actually this organizing functional capability workshop was conceptualized by Smita ma'am. And when we thought of inviting somebody from finance, the one word which immediately madam said, invite Sangeeta ma'am, she is brilliant. And ma'am, you have really lived on it. Basically the basics of finance which you have given to the students in 6 hours, actually you have summarized the different chapters of finance in a very easy and lucid manner. I am not a finance background management student, but I love finance understanding. So while attending your class, in fact, I was also trying to understand ratio kaise nikalte and how to make sure that I should also learn some concept of finance. Thank you for being so kind to us and guiding students from overall perspective in terms of their future, in terms of finance as a subject, and also in terms of your varied expertise and knowledge. So may I request Shruti if you just quickly do a group photo with Sangeeta ma'am, and then we may just sign off from our today's session. I request all the students to kindly on your video. You get a very rare opportunity to meet a person like Sangeeta ma'am. And we are very happy that even if it is on online mode, we got an opportunity to see ma'am and meet her. So, Shruti, just let us know when we have to be in a smiling pose for group photo. Param, if Shruti is unable to hear me, can you? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, ready for the picture, yeah.
Ria, you may off the recording.